Welcome. This is Gutted. Loaves, fishes, and being more than the sum of your parts. I'm Dr. Stacy Marquis, and today we're looking at Season 1, Episode 6 of The Chosen. The title, Indescribable Compassion. A line stretches outside a first-century pawn shop. This is a trauma economy, people trading pieces of themselves to assure survival. Poverty doesn't just strip resources, it strips dignity in slow, public increments. The next person in line enters, a man, and in his hand, a leather roll containing high-quality tools. Letting go of them is more than financial. It's the loss of function, of usefulness, of the right to contribute. The shopkeeper offers 20 denarii, a lowball offer if there ever was one. And as the man is making his case, his sleeve slips. His lesions are visible. Leprosy. The shopkeeper recoils. Why can't you just die? Shame doesn't just exile. It accuses people of surviving. The man, he says, he means no harm. His tools are all he has left. He grabs the 20 denarii and flees. Meanwhile, in the marketplace, Gaius and Matthew are standing guard over a chest of, well, what looks like pirate treasure. Matthew is anxious, fidgeting with a piece of cloth. It gives his hands something to do when the environment is too much, which, for Matthew, is often. He wonders if they should lock the money in the booth. He sees Gaius' sword and asks, does he need one too? Gaius sighs. Really? This can't be the first time Matthew has watched over a couple of months' worth of taxes on his own. Matthew corrects him. It's actually 2 years and 7 months worth of taxes. And then he proceeds to explain the math. When the world gets unpredictable, Matthew reaches for precision. Data is his anchor. Pattern is his protection. Gaius tells him to just stop. Just act natural. Matthew says he is natural. He looks exactly how he feels. It's meant to be funny, but really, it's sad. Matthew doesn't do camouflage. He doesn't have the internal algorithms most people use to blend in. What you see is what you get. Marcus, a Roman guard, enters. He looks at the box and whistles. He thought it was a joke. Matthew says that watching the sailors leap from their boats might be seen as comical. There were so many fish that the boats were sinking. It's Matthew being literal Matthew. Marcus scoffs. There is no way. Gaius suggests they save this conversation for the road. Marcus makes a joke about guarding a couple of months' worth of taxes. Gaius and Matthew exchange a look. Back in the legal section of the temple, imagine half seminary, half homeowners association. Nicodemus is delivering his report on John the Baptizer. He says John is strange but harmless, and that arresting him probably gave him more attention than his message ever could. Nicodemus is trying to thread the needle between tradition and transformation. He knows how fragile power can be, especially when it feels threatened by prophets in, well, camel hair. The Din is confused, saying they issued no such order. Nicodemus, also perplexed, says he saw the affidavits. Shmuel steps forward and admits he turned in John. He quotes Torah, "He who justifies the wicked and condemns the righteous is an abomination." A bold move, especially with his teacher standing right there. The Din tells Shmuel that quoting Solomon is not a justification, and that his actions were reckless, and that he is astonished that any student of the great Nicodemus would bypass his teacher so completely. He dictates that going forward, Shmuel will defer to Nicodemus. Shmuel nods, but his posture, it isn't submission, it's containment. He's managing the moment while mentally retreating. His allegiance is already unraveling. The student is drifting from the very man who taught him to listen for God. And in place of that relationship, Shmuel is listening only for himself. Psychologically speaking, this is what fear often does. It dresses up as righteousness, but it isolates like shame. The disciples are packing up camp. It's obvious. This is their first camp out. The tents are half up or half down, and someone has definitely stepped on the bread. Simon mutters, "This is a lot." Little James laughs. He says he totally thought he was ready for life on the road. Hunger, snakes, totally expected. But no one told him about the blisters. This is early stage group dynamics. Sarcasm becomes currency. Humor is the safest way to say, "I'm struggling too." It softens the edges of discomfort without demanding outright vulnerability. Simon asks little James what he did before, well, all of this. It's a normal question, but beneath it, Simon's really asking, how did you end up here? What makes you qualified to follow him? Little James was on his way to Jerusalem to audition for the 288, the elite temple choir. Simon quips, "Right, and he was Caesar's favorite gladiator." It's deflection, but it's also connection. This is how trust starts. One laugh, one jab, one admission at a time. As Simon returns to wrestling a tent, little James begins to sing. His voice, it's steady and soft. One by one, the others stop and listen. When little James finishes, Simon says, "It's clear why Jesus chose him." But underneath the compliment sits an ache. Simon still carries his own question rooted in doubt. Why me? It's imposter syndrome, just first century edition. Little James says he doesn't know if he will sing or not. Only Jesus knows who he'll become. It's not resignation, it's trust. Little James is releasing the need for certainty in exchange for relationship, a posture that for someone like Simon is still hard to grasp. Jesus enters the camp and, calling Simon, says he's escorting his mother back to Nazareth. He will catch up with them in Capernaum. Simon assures Jesus that he will make sure the others arrive safely. Jesus stops him. He wants Simon to go on ahead. He says Simon has matters to attend to at home. It's a small shift in the plan, but for Simon, who's wired for responsibility and constantly in protector mode, it's a reminder. This isn't his mission to control. It's an invitation to trust that following doesn't always mean managing. Back at Roman headquarters, Gaius and Matthew stand before Quintus. Matthew continues to fidget with his piece of cloth, the first century version of a stress toy. Quintus is thrilled with the latest tax haul. He pops an olive in his mouth, then offers one to Matthew. Matthew takes it hesitantly, using the cloth, of course. Quintus says, Simon clearly performs well under pressure, and he wonders, can he make him do it again? Matthew asserts, it wasn't Simon. There was another man. Quintus interrupts. He doesn't care how it happened, just that it did. Matthew presses in, but he saw no evidence of deception. Matthew's anxiety is manifesting as rigidity. This is a man whose entire world is built on structure, patterns, things that can be measured, and what he saw on the shoreline didn't just stretch the rules, it broke them. A messenger bursts into the room, shoving between Matthew and Gaius, announcing that Herod's envoy is an hour outside of town. Quintus becomes hyper-focused. He wants troops ready, uniforms perfect. He moves to his wardrobe. He's spit polishing his uniform and rehearsing his own greatness. He finally stops and turns around, and laughing, he looks at Matthew and Gaius and asks how long would they have continued standing there. He's like a cat toying with mice. He's grateful for the help with Simon, and so he promotes Gaius to Primi. Honored, Gaius begins to kneel, but Quintus shuts him down, saying, "Yeah, don't slobber." He turns to Matthew and tells him that he's wonderfully odd, and how he's not a stain under a wagon wheel is a mystery they will have time to unravel together. It sounds like mockery, but from Quintus, it might be the closest thing to affection. Because while we know Quintus is a narcissist with a penchant for cruelty, he also shows classic psychopathic traits. No remorse, no empathy, no stable attachments. And yet, even psychopaths can form bonds, typically with people who remind them of someone from their past, a sibling, a caregiver, a teacher. To most, Matthew is a mystery, but to Quintus, he might actually feel somewhat familiar. Matthew's still not done. He circles back, but there was no subterfuge with Simon. He knows what he saw. Quintus lays it out. Matthew has no guile. And then he tosses out a scenario. Your childhood rival shows up and sees you are more successful than him, and you want to make it clear that you won. What do you do? Matthew pauses and then answers, I'd show him my infrastructure plans. Conquest isn't just about taking land. It's about imposing a way of life. Even Gaius blinks. Quintus stares, stunned. It's brilliant. He rushes to his desk, tells them they are dismissed, and begins rifling through his scrolls. Matthew stands there, just shifting awkwardly. Gaius waits, watching him. Finally, he steps forward and grabs Matthew's arm, a signal that it's time to go. Back on the road, the disciples are walking and talking. We hear the words lemon and dill. It's group bonding through the ordinary. Mary sees a woman up ahead gathering wildflowers. She smiles and says, "It's a beautiful day to pick flowers." The woman nods. She sells them in the market if they ever want some. Her voice is cautious but kind. There's just a hint of pain just below the surface. Jesus steps forward. He points to her necklace and asks if it's from Egypt. The necklace is more than jewelry. It's a tether to a place that holds both beauty and ache. And Jesus sees it. She grew up in Egypt. Her father was Ethiopian. Jesus begins to speak in Egyptian, and the moment stills. Language is never just communication. It's belonging. And when Jesus speaks hers, he isn't just conversing. He's remembering with her. He speaks of things he saw during his childhood. Her eyes light up. She introduces herself. Her name is Tamar. He too introduces himself. He bids her peace. She replies shalom and turns to leave. The disciples are confused, and they ask Jesus, how can he speak Egyptian? He tells them that his family lived in Egypt for a while. His parents had to flee Bethlehem when he was 2. They are all amazed that he survived the slaughter of the innocents. They realize they're following someone who knows what it's like to be a refugee, to be spared when others weren't. As they resume their journey, we hear Mary scream. Everyone looks. The man from the pawn shop is walking toward them. He's deteriorated. His body is contorted. Lesions cover his skin. Leprosy, which in modern day is referred to as Hansen's disease, is a skin condition that starts slowly, usually as a numb patch of skin. But over time, it attacks the nerves, leaving people unable to feel pain. And that means that cuts, burns, and injuries go unnoticed and untreated. The body becomes disfigured. Limbs become weak. Eyesight fails. With modern-day antibiotics, it's easily cured, but that was not the reality during this time period. John steps forward, pulling his blade. Don't come any closer. The group scrambles, hands over their mouths. Tamar has returned and is watching everything. Jesus steps forward and puts his hand on John's shoulder, saying, "It's okay." He removes his backpack and begins to walk slowly toward the man, much like someone might approach an animal who's scared or injured. He's not just closing the distance physically, but also emotionally. He's regulating the moment through gentleness, modeling co-regulation before healing. Jesus' disciples continue to warn him, begging him not to get any closer. Jesus turns and, with a gesture and a look, communicates that they are to be silent. The man falls to his knees, weeping, and says, "Please, please don't turn away from me." He's not just asking for healing. He's asking not to be discarded again. Jesus comes closer and says, "I won't." The man says he knows that if Jesus is willing, he can heal him. The man's sister was a servant at the wedding in Cana, and she told him about Jesus' miracle. Jesus kneels in front of him and says, "I am willing." A choked sob escapes from the man's throat. He has no words. Jesus reaches out, puts his hand on the man's shoulder, and says, "Be cleansed." This man, who has been cut off from family, temple worship, his community, and his livelihood, is first given the gift of human touch. When someone is denied touch for long periods of time, it begins to rewire the body. The nervous system stays on high alert. The mind internalizes shame. The body forgets how to feel safe. Touch is our first language of connection. It's how infants bond with caregivers, how we learn to calm, to trust, to belong. So when Jesus chooses to touch him first, before explanation, he's doing more than restoring health. He's telling this man's body that you're still human, you are still loved, and you are not alone anymore. The man reaches for Jesus' arm, and we watch as the contraction of his hand eases and the lesions begin to vanish. It's a traumatized nervous system exhaling. We watch the faces of the disciples as they register what they are witnessing. We see Tamar, the woman who had been gathering flowers, drop her basket and gasp. She puts her hand over her mouth. The man examines his body and begins to laugh. He throws himself into Jesus' arms, saying "thank you" over and over. Jesus hugs him back, and when the man asks what he can do, Jesus says not to tell anyone. He's to go show the priests, make the appropriate offering, and then go live his life. It's not just a blessing. It's a release, a permission to re-enter the world as someone who belongs. Jesus turns to the group and asks, "Who has an extra tunic?" None of them are able to look away from what they're witnessing as their hands search their bags. Jesus says, only one is needed. Thaddeus moves first. He places the tunic over the man's shoulders. He's touching him, seeing him, believing what just happened. Jesus smiles. "Green? It's your color." The man laughs again. Tamar is still watching, and we see something register. She turns and runs, because once you see what she just saw, you can't just go back to selling flowers. We're back at Zebedee and Salome's house, and Salome is everywhere at once, plucking herbs, managing the grape drying, calling instructions towards the roof. "Spread out the flax, please, and check the grapes." Zebedee stops, too tart. His voice changes. "Salome, they're here." She yells back, "What?" But he's already running down the stairs from the roof. When Salome exits the house, she finds her husband hugging their sons, James and John. Then she sees Jesus. There's a stillness on her face. Jesus says, "Hello." She turns to her sons, calls them by name, and says, "Listen to him and stay by his side." This is maternal intuition cloaked in instruction. She's handing them over, not with fear, but with faith. They say they will. Jesus formally introduces himself. "I'm Jesus of Nazareth." And she responds, "Of course you are." Not a question, but a recognition. She invites everyone inside. Zeb pulls James and John aside and asks about Simon. They say he's at his home and that Andrew went to get him. Zeb smiles. He was afraid he would have to go drag him out of the hammer. James and John laugh. "Are you kidding? He's teacher's pet now." It's teasing, but it's also true. Simon is changing, and they're noticing. Inside Simon's home, his mother-in-law, Dasha, lies in a bed, pale and burning with fever. Simon is sitting beside her, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. He's quietly, a little off-key, singing a prayer. There's something sacred about his awkwardness. This does not come naturally for him, but it is coming. As she falls asleep, Simon adjusts the blankets and quietly leaves the room. Eden and Andrew are in the next room, and Andrew's telling her about the wedding at Cana, the food, the dancing, the miracle. Eden stops him. "Wait, you danced?" Andrew grins. "I did." She laughs, not because she doubts him, but because the mental image is objectively hilarious. Humor is how intimacy sneaks into suffering. They're not just surviving Dasha's illness. They're living alongside it. Simon enters, telling them that Dasha's breathing is labored, but steady. Andrew, trying to raise the mood, says, "That was some soulful singing in there, my man." Simon glares. Andrew eats a grape. This is brotherhood, tension, teasing, and the kind of presence that doesn't ask you to explain your mood. It just makes space for it. Join me next time as we look at part 2 of this episode. This is Gutted. Loaves, fishes, and being more than the sum of your parts.